right. Hello. Welcome to All Things Odd. I'm Dr. Natalie Phillips.
I'm Dr. Hannah Galloway.
And I'm Whitney Hodges.
Okay, so we've got a fun topic for you today, but we're going to talk about our YouTube first. So I'll let Dr. Galloway or Whitney talk about that real quick.
All right, so this is our YouTube channel. I had a second person recognize me from our YouTube channel, second time in my life. So that means that my face is getting somewhere. If you go to YouTube, you can search for our business name. You could subscribe. This is a nice way to send videos to people that don't have social media, or you can look at all of our fun thumbnail images that we spend so much of our valuable time coming up with.
Yeah, actually we did some fun ones, but
last week was especially exciting.
Oh, well, yeah, our thumbnails, let me see playlist. Like you can look at videos if you want to. I always like to show this one because I like the flexible is how
I like that too.
Yeah.
So there's some fun ones here. We're kind of going a little bit out of the fun realm and going into more of just like our topics. So you kind of just have to see if you like some of our topics, but it's easy because we put them all in playlists. So you can kind of go through the different ones. And like, let's say if we want to talk about actually all things odd, you can kind of see all of them. If you go to our playlist. I hope one doesn't play. Oh, there it is. Stop that. And you can kind of go through all the different ones and kind of see different ones that we have right over here. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So we are going to finish off National Speech and Hearing Month. And doesn't mean that we don't have to talk about this anymore, but we're kind of dedicating this to looking at some of just the awareness of audiology. So we talked about what it means to be an audiologist and what we go through as far as schooling. We've talked about dizziness and vertigo. And if you saw a reel from last time, it was pretty funny. But you can, I wonder if it's still on, I think it was in our stories. So
yeah,
on Instagram, but we talked about dizziness and imbalance because we see those types of patients and brain concussions. And then today we are actually going to talk about communication and how to have better communication. And so some of the facts here is that number one, around 5% of the world's population experience hearing loss. And what I thought was interesting was also that same another 5% of the population is also thought to experience problems with speech as well. So because this is National Hearing and Speech Month, we thought we'd talk about hearing and speech because they're closely related. And with communication being so important to us, basically, this Better Speech and Hearing Month is really to raise the awareness of just different communication problems, such as either the inability to hear, which is why we're here, audiologists, or to speak effectively. So we're going to talk a little bit more about communication strategies and kind of point out two different ways. And again, if you're watching and you have a great idea, or if you're watching later on the replay and you have a great idea, put it in the comments so people can kind of learn from you. We've kind of just picked a few that we thought would kind of at least cover the scope of what we want to talk about, but I'm sure there are other ways that people have found that they can help each other communicate better. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is communication strategies for people who have a hearing loss. So for those of you who have a hearing loss, this is going to be helpful, but also kind of think about if you don't have a hearing loss and you have a loved one, how can you help them be a little more assertive, right? And that's the point that I'm going to make is number one, if you have a hearing loss, don't try to hide it. Don't try to smile and like passively nod, because if sometimes that makes you get in trouble if somebody says, okay, so what do you think? And then if you're passively nodding, then you're going to have to make something up, or, if you really didn't hear what they were saying. So my point is, try not to hide your hearing loss, but instead be assertive. So assertive, I want to talk a little bit more about assertive, aggressive, or passive. So we talked about the passive nodding, right? So that's just passively. And you may get by with, that conversation, but really communication is about connection. So did you really connect to that person if you were just passively nodding, but you didn't hear anything they said? So that's passive. Some people go to the far extreme and go to being aggressive. Sometimes it's frustrating, we know, where you can't hear, and they get mad like, well, my wife or my loved one or my husband should have known that I can't hear this, so it's their fault, or they're the ones that's mumbling, or whatever it is. So they start blaming people in that aggressive type of attitude. So we don't want you to go all the way to the other side. But being assertive just basically means like if you're in a grocery store and you're having a hard time hearing and you can't like leave the checkout line to say, can we have this conversation in a quieter area? You can be assertive and say, oh, you know what? Excuse me. I actually have a little bit of a hearing loss. So can you please repeat that or whatever it is, right? And we'll go over some other strategies. But the first one is to be assertive, not passive, not aggressive, but be assertive. And I'm going to pass it over to Whitney for a tip from her.
Absolutely. So I'm going to be talking about modifying that listening environment. And Dr. Phillips actually did a nice lead in with, if you're talking to someone in the grocery store, asking if you can move outside or move somewhere quietly to have that conversation. But I know a lot of us go out to restaurants, and restaurants can be super noisy environments, especially now how a lot of them are designed, really tall ceilings, lots of hard surfaces, that modern aesthetic, which can make it really difficult to hear, not to mention any background music, dishes clanging, things like that. So some ways that you can modify listening environments are try to be mindful of where's a lot of the noise coming from, or, where could you sit? Maybe if there's a booth option, you might try that, since booths often have fabric, which can help absorb some of that background noise. You need to think about anticipating, like, okay, I know I'm going to be going out to this restaurant, or I'm going to be going to the movies, or I'm going to be going to this location. And sometimes I have a hard time hearing in those situations. Think about things you can do. Sitting closer to individuals, making sure that you're facing people rather than maybe sitting beside them, and anticipating things. So maybe you get out your phone and, have them type something if you can't hear it, or write something down. There's little ways that you can anticipate any difficulties that you might have hearing in some tricky environments, and ways to mend those. When you are in those difficult listening situations, try to have tools in your back pocket that you can use so that you can hopefully prevent kind of leading into that aggressive state when you're communicating. So again, rather than, nodding your head, if you don't hear, say, I'm sorry, it's loud in here. Do you mind repeating that for me? Or if you caught part of it, say, I know that you said something about soccer practice, but what was that again? Can you say that? That way people know that you are listening. It's just a little bit difficult. So just be mindful of, areas where it might be hard. Have some realistic expectations. A lot of normal hearing individuals also have troubles in those really loud situations. So cut yourself some slack, but be ready to have some tools in your back pocket that you're able to whip out, and let your loved ones know as well, like, hey, I might be doing this just so I can understand and be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, and speaking of tools to have in your back pocket, so I'm going to talk about some kind of like assistive devices, but when you talk about hearing aids, a lot of hearing aids have an app that goes with them. So it's kind of like a tool in your back pocket, honestly, because if you're wearing hearing aids, you can get out your app and like maybe make some adjustments that might be able to help you in that environment. If you wear hearing aids, your audiologist might have talked to you about accessories too, like a remote microphone or something like that, that's going to help you to be able to pick up voices a little bit better. So there's also kind of tools that you can use to help yourself. There's technology you can use without your hearing aids too. I know we've talked about apps on this show before, like captioning apps. Those can be really helpful, like what Whitney was talking about, even just to have as like a second glance at the conversation. You're listening to somebody, they might not even know you have it like captioning, but then you're, kind of glancing down just to double check like what was said. Or off the top of my head, like that Tunity app that you can use with TV. That can be really helpful too, without hearing aids, just being able to use, the app or something like that.
Yeah. And also I was going to throw in that SoundCloud, right?
Oh,
That
yeah.
we've talked about, or
Uh-huh.
Sonic Cloud. I'm sorry, Sonic Cloud. And you can look at our YouTube channel for us talking with a person who actually started Sonic Cloud. And so those are just setting up hearing profiles depending on what you're wearing and what you're streaming as well. So lots of different things that you can use to help communicate better, hear better, assistive technology, and also some things that can work with your hearing aids as well. So
And sometimes
then,
Oh,
mhm.
sorry. Sometimes it's brand specific. So I would say, if like Widex hearing aids versus Starkey versus, they all have different accessories. So it might be worth asking your audiologist, when I'm in this environment, I'm noticing this. Is there anything, other accessories or anything that might help me to get more specific information too?
Yeah, good point. Good point. All right. So we are going to kind of just go round robin again and share some communication strategies for if you're a communication partner of somebody that has a hearing loss. So again, we talked earlier about if you have a hearing loss, how you can use different strategies, repair strategies, anticipatory strategies. You can use tech, try to be assertive. But now for the loved ones, right? The communication partner, the one that either comes with you to your appointments or the ones that they have to now figure out, how do I communicate better with my loved one that has a hearing loss? These are communication strategies for that. And so for my tip, I would say try to speak naturally, not too quickly, not don't slow your speech or like try to extend it. So I'm going to try to pretend like I'm doing that. So a lot of people try to slow their speech and over exaggerate. And what happens is when you shout or slow your speech, it tends to distort it. And so instead of that, a great idea would be continue to talk how you're talking, but maybe pause a little bit. Pause between where you wouldn't normally pause, but at the same rate and the way that you would be talking, because you don't want to distort speech. And if they're using visual cues to be able to hear and communicate, especially in like a noisy environment, then you definitely do not want to make your mouth look like this. And so don't slow your speech, don't shout, don't try to over exaggerate. Just continue the regular pace that you are. Just pause frequently in between what you're doing.
Another thing to keep in mind when you're communicating with someone who might have hearing loss is rephrasing rather than repeating what you said. So maybe you try to say something and for whatever reason, they're just not able to understand it. Rather than just keep saying it the same way, maybe try to find a different way that you can say it. That way, they might be able to pick up different pieces and form a full, picture of what you were trying to say. Or it might just be, the one way you said it just wasn't clicking. And so then that next time that you rephrased it, they were able to understand it. Definitely refrain from getting frustrated or saying, you know what, never mind, because that can be frustrating for both parties. So just keep in mind that rephrasing anything can also be really helpful.
Yep. And also getting the person's attention before you start talking to them. So I think that one's huge. And I tell a lot of patients that, especially when they're talking about communicating around the house with their spouse that, maybe they've been married to for 30 years. And so like the listening environment is a little bit different now because you're not hearing quite as well. So like be sure to say my name before, you start saying something. So that way I know to, turn and listen or you get my attention. Other things that you want to do are make eye contact. I try really hard not to turn away from somebody, especially if I know that they're lip reading or using my mouth, because what we do as audiologists is we turn around to like do something on the computer and adjust their hearing aid, but then they've just lost that stream of information from you. So I try really hard to make that eye contact. If you're making eye contact, they can probably see your mouth too. So it's just a little bit easier of a way to communicate. And then the other thing is too, realizing that somebody with hearing loss, they're taking a little bit longer to kind of catch up with the conversation because they're missing parts of it. So imagine if you were missing every third word, and not that that's the way it happens, but if you were missing 30% of what's said, your brain is working so hard to fill that information in. And then, okay, was that fish or dish according to the context? And then, you're just exhausting yourself. So I think that sometimes normal hearing, people don't realize how much fatigue there is associated with just trying to get all the same information that everyone else is getting. It's really fatiguing to try to like sort through all that information. And so I think that, like Natalie was saying with taking pauses, that's important. I sometimes have the habit of talking fast and not taking huge pauses in between what I say because I want to get it all out there. But learning about what Dr. Phillips was saying about not distorting the way your mouth moves was huge for me, because since I learned that, I've seen so many people, and yeah, it just makes your mouth like bit like this, just like this, and it's all the same, and you can't tell. And you might think you're helping them because you are being louder, or it is maybe more clear, but you're not thinking about the way that your lips naturally move, and that's what somebody could be relying on, for all of that. So I think there's a lot of different things, but especially saying somebody's name or making eye contact with somebody, before you start speaking, that sort of sets them up that, oh, okay, they need my attention.
So, again, these are just some communication strategies that we thought up of for people that have a hearing loss. And then also we just finished talking about for loved ones. And I have to laugh too, because even as audiologists, so we're not, pointing fingers or anything, but when Dr. Galloway talked about that one thing where, we sit and we talk to our patient, but then we turn around, and we of all people should know that, or we like get ready, or I'm talking to them and I'm outside the booth and they're getting ready for their hearing test, and I just put earplugs in, or something like that. So there's a lot of things that are great to be reminded about, but then also, again, sharing it out, right? So some of the things, if you were watching this show, you might be like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Or, oh yeah, I knew that, just as a great reminder. So again, help us share this out, because we are ending the month of May, which is the National Speech and Hearing Month. And we want to make sure that we are sharing and really spreading that awareness of hearing better and communicating better, really. So if you have any other communication strategies that maybe we might not have covered, please put it in the comments as well. And just as a reminder, we are actually not going to have a live show for the next 2 weeks. And we will be back on June 20th. And we'll have some great fun summer things that we're going to be talking about as well. So with that, we are going to end the show today, and we will see you in a couple weeks. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.